All right. So are you ready to dive into, like, I don't know, a fascinating corner of the relationship world?
I think so. Hit me with it.
Okay, so today's deep dive, get this, is an ebook called 30 Red Flags in Women That Can Ruin Your Relationship.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, I know, right? The title's a lot. I mean, it sounds like, something your kind of grumpy uncle might forward you, but
Yeah.
stick with us.
I'm intrigued.
Because it's actually really interesting, like for a deep dive. It's kind of like holding a funhouse mirror up to some of those societal expectations around, dating and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And even if we don't agree with the premise at all, just kind of unpacking these so-called red flags,
Right.
can actually give us some really good insights into like relationship patterns and honestly, maybe even our own biases.
Totally. Because even flawed perspectives, they can still teach us something about like ourselves and how we relate to other people. So I'm on board.
Exactly. Okay, so the author, he kicks things off by being like, this is my grand mission, basically to like equip men with this like early warning system for, relationship disasters.
Oh, boy.
Right. He's very, very serious about this. He wants to identify potential problems like before it's too late.
That's a loaded phrase, right? Before it's too late. Like any relationship that doesn't fit, whatever this mold is automatically doomed.
Totally. And he does not shy away from like his own biases either. Like he even throws in a little jab at woke culture at one point saying that, it's making men lose their rights and making it harder to find a traditional relationship.
Interesting. So we're already seeing, this framing of traditional gender roles as like the foundation of, you know what I mean? Like a successful relationship. Not a lot of acknowledgement of all the diverse ways that relationships can actually thrive in, today's world.
Right. And speaking of traditional, he really puts a lot of emphasis on this goal of like finding a wife to start a family with. He even has this one quote where he says that men are looking for real women, whatever that means.
Right.
Instead of what he calls a monkey in a silk suit.
Okay.
So, yeah, just a taste of, the language we're dealing with here.
It's a lot. It's like he's looking at relationships as a way to maintain this like very specific social order.
Yes.
Where everyone has their very defined role.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so with that, interesting context in mind, are you ready to like really unpack some of these infamous red flags?
Yeah, let's do it. And remember, everyone, we are not endorsing these views here, but we're analyzing them to see like what can we learn about ourselves, about the, ever-changing world of relationships.
Yes, exactly. Okay, red flag number 1. Right out of the gate, he says she is a single mother. And he actually goes as far to say that none of these scenarios bode well for you.
Wow. So, I mean, that statement alone shows just how quickly judgments can be made.
Right.
About someone based solely on, like, their family structure.
Totally.
Without taking into account all the other factors,
right.
That actually contribute to who a person is.
Right. And, like, their potential in a relationship. Yeah. It's like he's saying that having kids is like an automatic disqualifier from being a good partner. And he even tells this whole anecdote about, I think, a friend of his who ends up, like, raising 3 kids, and only one of them was actually biologically his.
Oh, wow.
And he just paints this very specific picture of single mothers as like burdens, which just feels really unfair, honestly.
It does. And it just shows like the danger of making these huge generalizations about entire groups of people, based on like limited experience or personal biases.
Totally. Okay, let's move on to something maybe a little bit less charged.
Okay.
How about red flag number 4? Her body. A canvas.
The tattoo debate.
Yes.
It never goes away.
Never.
It's so interesting, right? Like, this is such a personal choice, and yet people have such strong opinions about it.
Totally. He describes tattoos as being visually captivating and stunning, but then he's immediately like, however, they could be a sign of underlying problems. And then he even throws in this phrase, betaization of a man.
Oh, here we go.
When describing, a guy with tattoos.
So loaded, that phrase.
I know, right?
Assumptions about masculinity. What does it even mean to be, a manly man like, in a relationship? Like tattoos somehow take away from your strength or something.
Right. And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to link tattoos to, like, impulsivity.
Okay.
He even suggests that women with tattoos might be more likely to, like, cheat because they lack the ability to withstand social pressure.
Wow. Classic example of correlation not equaling causation, right? Just because someone has a tattoo does not mean that they are automatically impulsive or untrustworthy.
Right. It's like saying, oh, they got a tattoo, so clearly they're also super comfortable making rash decisions in their relationships.
Right, exactly. Which, of course, huge leap in logic.
Huge.
Right. I mean, people get tattoos for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
Self-expression, commemorating an experience.
Right.
Maybe they just like the art. To reduce it to like this one single negative personality trait is so simplistic.
Totally. And it makes you wonder, like, what other assumptions are kind of lurking beneath the surface of all these like so-called red flags?
Right. It's like we're going to peel back the layers of all of these societal expectations.
Yes.
What are the biases that are really shaping, how we view what makes a good partner?
Yes, exactly. And, as we're talking about this, it's almost like he's like created this caricature of what he thinks, a desirable woman should like look and act like.
Right.
And any like deviation from that image is like, whoo, red alert.
Exactly. And it speaks to this idea, right, that you can approach relationships with this checklist, that you prioritize all these superficial qualities, these rigid expectations over like actually connecting with another person,
Yes. 100%.
Oh.
Okay, speaking of superficial, like his next red flag, when I read this one, I was like, what? Get ready for this, okay? He says, adorned with piercings.
Okay.
He seems to have like a thing against anything other than, as he puts it, pure skin.
Wow. So again, we're seeing this conflation, right, of like piercings, tattoos, whatever, with like a lack of stability or, like this need for attention, right?
Yes.
And it speaks to like how powerful societal norms really are, like how quickly we form judgments about people based on how they look.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like if they deviate even slightly from, like whatever the norm is, it's like.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he doesn't hold back like the generalizations either. He's basically saying women with piercings like could be influenced by current trends. And like lacking in long-term thinking, maybe. He even implies like that they're trying to go against popular opinion. It's like
he sees like self-expression through like body modification as this threat.
Yes.
As opposed to like a celebration of individuality. And it's this fear of nonconformity, right? Like that seems to be at the root of so many of these.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
It's like he wants to take everyone and put them in this little box and be like, you're good, you're bad.
Right. And like
based
on these, like, what?
Right. Like, what are we even doing here?
Right. It's so unrealistic.
Totally.
And at the end of the day, like, not helpful in your relationships because people are complex, right?
Right.
We don't fit into these neat little categories that he's trying to put us in.
Totally. Okay, let's move on to one. This one kind of delves into a little bit more of a sensitive area, maybe.
Okay.
This one, he calls it, she has a bad relationship with her father.
Yes.
Yeah.
The classic daddy issues trope.
Yes.
It's a common one. It's oversimplified and often very misconstrued.
Yes, totally. He basically is saying if a woman doesn't have like a picture-perfect relationship with her dad, that she's doomed to repeat these patterns.
Right.
In her romantic relationships, he even goes as far as to say that like any man in her life will become the next monster in her life.
Oh, wow. Well, yes, it is true that like our childhood experiences, particularly with, our parents, our primary caregivers, can impact, things like our attachment style and how we show up in relationships.
Right.
It's just so important to like not fall into that trap of deterministic thinking. Right. It's not like because
you had
because you had this one experience, you are now,
doomed forever.
Exactly. Right. People can grow and change. They can heal. To suggest that like they can't is, not only reductive, but also kind of harmful potentially.
Totally.
Because you're just putting these limits on people.
Right.
So I think, it's important to like come to these conversations with a lot of nuance, with a lot of, space for people to not fit into these boxes.
100%. Okay, before we wrap up this section, I want to like touch on one more.
Okay.
Because it really stood out to me.
Yeah. It's
titled, She is Open to Having Unprotected Sex.
Okay. Yeah, that one immediately, like my ears perked up a little bit because that's such it's so loaded, that statement,
Totally, yeah.
Because it really is about like personal values. It's about societal norms,
right?
Risk assessment.
Yes.
It's a lot.
And He basically like equates it with promiscuity and a lack of self-respect, which is just like,
right.
It's judgmental.
It is. And frankly, a little bit misogynistic in the sense that it's really taking away a woman's agency.
Right.
Right? When it comes to her body, her choices,
right.
her sexual health, her sexual behavior.
100%.
Yeah.
It's almost like he can't fathom the idea that like a woman might choose to like, engage in unprotected sex.
Right.
For reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with wanting to get pregnant.
Of course. There's so many factors at play, right? Maybe she's in a committed relationship.
Right.
Maybe they've had open conversations about contraception.
Yeah.
Maybe she has certain beliefs about certain types of contraception.
Yes.
Like, who are we to judge? Or make assumptions about someone based on, like, very limited information.
Totally. Okay, so we've explored, I think, a good amount of these so-called red flags.
Right.
And I think it's probably safe to say many of them very, very problematic.
For sure.
To say the very least. But, okay, now for the real question here.
Yeah.
What do we do with this? Like, how do we actually move forward, in our relationships, in our dating lives, without being, like, totally freaked out?
Right.
And like, resorting to, these checklist-style, dating practices.
Yeah, that's where the real work begins.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to dig into in this last part.
So after, like, that whirlwind tour of red flags, he wraps it all up with a section called, like, what does this mean for you? It's like he's trying to offer some, like, words of wisdom after, like, stirring up all this anxiety about, all the ways you could potentially mess up your relationship.
Yeah.
And he starts by, like, really emphasizing how important it is to, quote, act with rationality, not ignorance.
Okay.
Like he's saying, like, now that you've read my book, you can, like, go forth and approach relationships with this, like, newfound logic.
Right, which, kind of begs the question, can you actually navigate relationships from, like, a purely rational place?
Probably, yeah.
Is that even possible?
Right. And, like, I don't know. I feel like there's something to be said, too, for, like, intuition, for emotional connections.
Yeah.
Like, it's not always just about, like, checking boxes on a checklist.
Yeah. Totally. And yet that seems to be what he's putting forward, right? It's this very, like, linear, almost like formulaic approach to, like, finding the one.
Yeah. He even says at one point, like, now you know what to look for before pairing up with someone. As if it's that easy.
Right. Like he's giving you the secret formula.
Right.
For relationship success. And we all know it doesn't exist.
Right.
It's messy. Yeah. It's complicated.
Yeah.
There are a lot of surprises.
100%.
And while, it is helpful to be aware of, like, potential challenges, red flags, whatever you want to call them, it's so important to, I think, approach each connection with an open mind.
Totally.
And a willingness to, like, look beyond just those superficial qualities. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so for our listener out there who maybe, like, after listening to this is like, oh my God, I'm never going to find anyone, right?
Right.
Like, what would you say is, like, the takeaway? How do we, like, apply all of this, to our dating lives in a way that's actually healthy and productive?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And I think the key here, honestly, is to use this information not as, like, a weapon. Or like a literal checklist, like we were saying, but as a tool for self-reflection.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. So you can ask yourself, like, okay, which of these so-called red flags, like, really resonate with me and why?
Oh, interesting.
What does that say about my values, about my insecurities, about maybe, like, past experiences that I'm bringing to the table? That is such a good point, because it's not about, like, taking this list and then, like, judging every potential partner.
Exactly.
It's about using it to understand yourself better.
Yes. And I think, like, as you understand yourself better, as you understand, like, your needs, your desires, your patterns, it becomes so much easier to just choose partners who are actually compatible with you.
Right.
Red flags or not.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because then it's not about, like, does this person fit into this perfect mold that I've created in my head? It's more about, okay, we're both bringing our full selves to this.
Yes. It's about connection, not perfection.
Yeah. Yes, I love that.
Right.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think it's time to, like, wrap up this deep dive into the world of, we'll call them relationship considerations.
Like, considerations. I like that.
We've covered a lot. We did, from single mothers to tattoos.
Right.
Daddy issues, unprotected sex, you name it, we talked about it.
And I think through it all, Like the biggest takeaway, right? The thing I really hope your listeners, walk away with is just how important critical thinking is.
Yes.
How important it is to like have these open conversations with, the people you're dating.
Totally.
And to also maintain that healthy dose of skepticism, I think, when it comes to, all the advice that's out there, because it can be so contradictory.
Totally. Especially about love and relationships.
Yeah.
It's about like trusting your gut, knowing yourself,
Yes.
and just being open.
Absolutely.
To connection, even if it means like throwing out the checklist and embracing like a little bit of a mess.
100%. The mess is where it's at. Yes, exactly. The good stuff. Well, on that note, thank you for joining us on this very thought-provoking journey.
Yes. Thank you all.
And until next time, happy diving.